all of our language data, we want to train some systems. How much do we need? How much language data is enough? This is material from Nick Evans, who says that to create a corpus, we should exemplify language components at least once. Now, if we're building machine learning systems, we'd likely want to see things more than once so that we can build up statistical significance in the data that we're working with. But say that we're just putting together a language corpus for linguistic research. The linguist would want to include at least one of these: a token of every phoneme, so remember phonemes from the first week, the units of sound that are meaningfully distinct, a minimal pair to demonstrate each contrast, so bat or pat will be minimal pairs showing the phonemic contrast between the p and the b sounds. We want examples of the inflectional changes on verbs. So this is a bit like to jump, jumping, see, sees, eat, eats, eating. And we want verbs with every inflectional value that are possible. Now, in some languages, that can get really complex. So the language Nen from the southern highlands of Papua New Guinea, verbs can have over 3,000 inflectional features. So a word will change based on the subject, the object, the tense, and the direction of the words. All of you keep on talking to the linguist over and over again so that he learns the language. That word can be broken down into this gloss, which is the middle row. And below here we see a key for what the gloss means. I wonder if Mark or Catherine would care to describe what these are. Is that putting you too much on the spot?
Things like, so abs is absolutive. It's a term sort of deciding whether something in languages, you often get nominative, accusative, but sometimes you get ergative, absolutive. So absolutive is a way of just talking about whether it's a subject or an object kind of thing in a different way. Iterative, again, sort of over and over. Not sure, that second symbol. Yeah, there's lots of, could be imperfect. I don't know, there's lots of that. There's a lot of ones I haven't come across. That's the trouble with different languages. They end up with lots of different, you know, slightly different perspectives or perfectives or imperfectives, etc. that you don't always have. So yeah, and the triangle one, oh, no idea, never seen that. But
is that the plural? So I was looking at this the other night, and I think does the large plural mean that he's talking to the community? He's saying all of you.
Yeah, because you can get plurals, or you can get duals, or you can get trials. So sometimes you're talking to 2 people, 3 people, more than usually. I haven't come across 4, but usually 3, you know, 3 or more. Yeah. Oh, I see. They've got it down the bottom. Iterative, future imperative. Sorry, I didn't see that.
There you go. You got it right.
Yeah, imperative is when it's a command. Non-dual means it's not 2 people. Imperfective aspect means it's an unfinished action. So something like I was doing something. No, so I did it would be it's done in the past, but was doing it's kind of going on in the past. Large plural, there you go. So there's a large plural as opposed to a small plural. Actor is usually like a subject, like the person doing the thing. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Ben, can I ask Mark another question?
Sure.
As a computer scientist, I'm just fascinated. So Mark, you said this set of terms differs for different languages. Does the linguist, like if Nick Evans is working on NEN, does he get to invent these, or are these something that linguistics already has and he just selects from a set of them?
There are standard ones that people use, so things like ergative absolutive is an example, but actually people make them up as they go along. So sometimes language has a feature that some other languages just doesn't have. So a linguist could find one and go, wow, this is something, this is new. And so they have to invent a term, so your typical terms are things like purgative. So, you have ablatives. So that people like to make up words from Latin. So ablative is from, something that's from, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have a purgative, it's like through, per in Latin, etc. So people, they can make stuff up that either other people don't use, or that maybe just doesn't feature so much in other languages. But sometimes people use them in different ways. That's actually the problem. So ergative absolutive gets used in different ways in different grammars. So I've come across grammars where I go, oh, okay, that's not how I would break those two things up. So it's a combination of people using things in slightly different ways, and combination of making new ones.
And yeah, it's true. Even when they make new ones, like all grammar is still ruled by Latin. It's still colonial that way. Like all these terms, like at some point we need to clean that up. It doesn't need to be Latin anymore.
Or Greek.
Thank you.
Okay. So one other point about this is that this is called an interlinear glossed text. So it means the gloss, oh, sorry, my highlighting is terrible. The gloss line is in between, it's interlinear with a transcription and a translation. So interlinear gloss text is the term that you might come across when you're working with language data, particularly if provided by linguists who like glossing things.
And the other thing, just important, sorry, Ben, probably to mention for people working on these things is the dashes. So the dashes always, so that's not part of the orthography of the word. So, when you write that word normally, you wouldn't necessarily, maybe you have an orthography with them, but usually not. But it's for a linguist's way of saying, I see these as the different parts of the word, different suffixes or infixes or prefixes. So it's a way of just identifying those. And that can, that's important to know, obviously, for a computer, interface kind of thing. So there could be another layer, which would be, this is the way you actually write it in the orthography of the language. That's their spelling system. Here's the way we're breaking it up as a linguist. And again, that can be different. Different linguists might break the thing up in slightly different ways. So that's not even necessarily set in stone.
So, sorry, question to follow on from that. So you're saying that to another linguist, this might not be a single word, but in another linguist, this might be, what, 2 or 3 words?
Not typically, but they might break it up in different ways, because where the boundaries happen, the way the sounds, there can be changes. These kind of, if you're adding a suffix or a prefix, there might be some funny phonological things that go on. So extra letters get put in. So it depends how people treat those, whether they treat those as an allomorph or as and does it go on, which side of the boundary does it go on? But there could be, it could be that some people might see one of those as being separated. Typically, linguists have tests to decide whether something's a prefix or a suffix. It behaves in a certain way if it's a suffix as opposed to a separate word. And so, a linguist who's done their job will have done some tests on it and decided, no, this is a thing that can't be separated, easily. And but that's not even always the case. In the language I work on, there's a rule that if it's a part of the verb, it should always come in front. But I've seen examples where it comes after suddenly, or something that's supposed to be a suffix can sometimes just be a separate word. So these things are not always that straightforward. Yeah.
I want to add to that. So it's not only about word boundaries or morphology. In general, there's a lot of controversy also in just classifying things, because in the end, there is no such thing as a verb and a noun, where what we're talking about there is functions, and how something functions in an utterance that can be massively differently interpreted by not only different linguists, but also different speakers, right? So this is why language is tricky, communication is tricky. There's a lot of misunderstandings, and linguists don't all agree on how stuff should be interpreted. So.
A nice example of that is in Latin, the gerund and gerundives. I mean, a gerund is basically a verb functioning as a noun, and gerundive is a verb functioning as an adjective. So, you know, it's just like a way of saying, oh, that's weird. It's doing the
Gerund
job.
being the ing form, like talking. Like, is that, if I'm saying like, oh, I'm doing the talking, is talking a noun then, right? Or is it still a verb?
Anyway, just to show that it's complex and no one ever agrees on anything. Just like probably very similar in your world, I imagine.
Yeah, but maybe computers can help with that, Ben.
Maybe. I think quite often the computers don't even need to know about it. So is it do you treat something as a verb based on the statistical significance of when it appears rather than its function?
But that's not how humans make sense of that, right?
No, but the way that computers make sense of the world is very different from the way that computers do.
Interestingly, Catherine, it's also true to say for your average, this is the other side of it, is that it's probably only linguists who get caught up in it. So your average speaker who's a fluent speaker of the language, it's the same as a computer. Something's going on in their head. Do they know about it necessarily? Not necessarily. So I guess it's it's a similar thing in a way.
Okay, some other reasons why communities may need large corpora. Some of these go back to the policies of Codal that we're interested in supporting people's wishes to be remembered through their storytelling. So having records of a range of recordings. Having examples for dictionaries. So when people are putting together the words in dictionaries, some examples, sentences, it's good having natural uses of that and a range again. And having sufficient material to create language technologies from. When we have language data, we are going to need to prepare it, clean it, normalize it in different ways. We do different things based on planning for recording, or after we've been given some material, what do we need to do to clean it up? So the left-hand column here, planning for a recording session. It's useful to have multiple microphones for multiple speakers. So this keeps the sound separation in the files. So we have individual files for individual speakers. It's cutting down on overlap between speakers, helps the systems to discern who the speakers are, and takes away that sort of mess of phonemes clashing with people speaking over the top of each other. Minimizing environmental noise is important. So in doing a recording session, turning off air conditioners, taking batteries out of clocks that are on the wall, these sorts of things if you're recording inside. Recording outside, wind is a terrible thing for audio recording. You might have seen in film productions, people put what they call dead cats or big fluffy things over the tops of their microphones to cut out the wind noise. The tent that you can see in these pictures was used by a sign language project called Iltram in Central Australia to reduce the number of flies that were around the filming. So if you're filming people signing and a fly comes along, then your data will be noisy because of that that unwanted fly swatting gesture, and it might be difficult to discern which was actual sign and which was a fly swat gesture. So different approaches to create spaces that are less noisy does affect sign and speech equally. Using lossless formats for the recordings is important. So we cut down on artifacts in the recordings based on compression. And WAV files are popular. We keep hearing this. For video productions, it depends on your budget. Video cameras that record lossless are extremely expensive and usually out of the reach of linguists or language workers. So when working with video, we often have to settle for compression. The question then becomes, what's the least compressed that we can do with our budget? MP4s and MOVs tend to be commonly used because they're available. When we receive recordings to use in, say, training a machine learning system, we'll need to do a range of tasks to either the audio or the video signal and to the texts. So we've heard before about the differences that spelling changes can make in even discovering or finding a language in an archive. So we need to normalize and correct errors in the way words are spelt. So in English, if we were building an English corpus, we would normalize the spelling of words like color into a single system. So you decide what your normalizations will be before doing so, and then you may be able to automatically process that, or you might have to do that manually. We remove transcriptions or remove annotations from transcription where people write the word hello, write the word ha 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 over the top of laughter in the audio signal. And it's generally best to remove unclear speech. We strip out codes, speaker codes, language codes from the annotations. The idea is to get the annotations, the transcriptions, to be as faithful representations of what is actually said, rather than messing or muddying them with these codes that may be useful for other research purposes. We remove punctuation, but we need to be aware of the language. So some languages use punctuation to mark tone. We had a script which removed all punctuation from texts in an early version of Elpis, speech recognition system, and somebody used that system for Chatino, which is a language that uses punctuation as a tone marker, and the entire corpus was stripped out. So they ended up having no data to train on. Removing background noise or reducing background noise is something that can be done computationally with audio processing software. I'm not so sure about video. There's some links there. There's a CRISP is a background noise removal technology for, I think they have about 30 languages that they can process. Or you could potentially build your own using these data sets of background noise. So you could train a machine learning system to recognize background noise and then drop it down from your recordings. This is a case study of a big project which Google did. I'll leave this one for your own reading, the link to the paper there, where they scraped thousands of corpora, thousands of samples of languages. They tried to work out which language each collection of text, each corpus came from, and then did a lot of automatic processing to clean it up. Some of the things that they noticed were that Unicode characters were misused. So sometimes a W was used that came from a wrong code block. The reason why this is a problem is that the intention of using Unicode characters from specific language blocks means that you can look at the characters that are used in a piece of text and you can identify which language that text is from based on which code block it comes from in Unicode. So in this pipeline, they dropped out any sentences that were problematic until a human language expert could be consulted. this is a process called human in the loop. We'll come back to that human in the loop idea in the speech recognition module. So automatic processing does the first pass, and then a human comes into it at some point to apply their expert knowledge.